So thank you all for joining Toxin Magazine's State of Rochester. Today, we will be discussing the police in school, the current violence that's happening in RSCD, right? Rochester City School District. We have a few people here, and I want you all to introduce yourselves and tell me who you are and why you wanted to participate in today's conversation. Let's start off with Fred.
My name is Fred Tanksley. I'm a community activist, and I'm part of what's called the Take It Down Coalition. I like to stay involved with current events that is happening in my community and to be active in bringing a positive change to those situations as they occur.
James?
My name is James Patterson. I am an elected official as of January. I'll be on the school board. I am also a certified teacher in New York State, and my background is in law enforcement, 27 years in law enforcement, 12 of which was an investigator for the New York State Police.
Barbara?
I'm Barbara Brody. I'm a retired social worker. My last job was 8 years in juvenile justice at a Watkin industry. And I also, after retiring, I also subbed in RCSD, which was eye-opening, as well as in Gates where I live. Before that, I used to do a lot of therapy with families and kids.
Kelly?
I'm Kelly LaLonde. I'm currently a English second language teacher or English new language teacher in high school in the Rochester City School District. I also publish a blog of my own personal experiences in the Rochester City School District, as well as invite others who need someone to tell their story in the city school district.
Okay, so recently we saw the story of a teacher at Franklin being sexually assaulted by a student. Now, Kelly was the person who actually published that story that went like wildfire. It went crazy. We saw it everywhere. Now, Kelly, I want you to start out and tell me what happened, how you got the story, why the teacher came to you, and all that fun, great stuff.
Okay, so like I said, I'm a teacher in the Rochester City School District, and I'm also, in another life, I thought I wanted to be a journalist when I did, in another life, right? I realized pretty quickly that wasn't the route for me, that the only time I didn't hate going to work was when I was teaching. So I went into teaching, but I also started blogging, and not necessarily about teaching, but I always kept up this kind of this exercise when I would really be upset about something, that I would like investigate it a bit and write about it. And that was really cathartic for me, especially in education, when there are so many things that are insane on a daily basis. And I think unless you're an educator, it's very hard to understand the insanity, or not just an educator, but intimately involved. I would have my husband even, not understand why I was upset about something. So using my blog was a way for me to share a lot of our stories and kind of humanize the idea of a teacher, right? And then, so I've been very public. 3 years ago, before the pandemic, I was assaulted at school. I was assaulted by a student that wasn't mine. And I was giving a New York State test too, which comes with its own set of problems, the testing environment. So I was slapped across the face at school. And I was treated really poorly by my administration. They didn't do anything about it. In fact, I was put on administrative leave for somehow causing my own assault. And after about 6 weeks, I decided I still didn't know why I was out of work. I still didn't know how the investigation, if there was one, was progressing. So I decided to write my side of the story. And that is what got the attention of my fellow teachers at the time, And I actually was reinstated to work the next day. And oh, we meant to call you type thing. So I've been really outspoken ever since I was assaulted at work, because while I was out, I Freedom of Information Act the district, and a teacher, this is before pre-pandemic, that year was assaulted every other day in the Rochester City School District. So the numbers are, and those are the ones that are reported. So it was clearly a problem, and the way assaults are handled in the district is clearly a problem. And not only teachers, but children assaulting each other, right? Fights in schools. So there clearly is a mechanism that's not working. The reason the teacher, Corrine, her name is, contacted me is because she knew of my previous success with my own blog about being assaulted. I also now work for a number of organizations, or speak for a number of organizations, about workplace safety at the national level. So she reached out to me in two capacities. Number one, to tell her story, because nobody was listening. And number two, to see what resources were available through my workplace abuse connections. So it's been a whirlwind. It's been her decision to go on the new shows that she's gone on. It's very overwhelming all of a sudden to be in the spotlight, especially when you haven't been heard for so long, like many teachers are. So there's a lot going on. But I gave her the platform that I had, which is my blog, which I'm really not that important. But I do consider myself a truth teller, and I do try to reach people with the realities of what we see every day. And this was one of those things. So I'm sure, like I said, that you have seen the story. I'm sure we've all seen the story. And if you have questions about the background, I'm willing to take them as much as I can. Really, like I said, I'm the vehicle for the story, and lending the humanity to the teaching aspect of this. So,
Well, I have a question, Kelly.
Yeah.
One is, don't you have telephones in your classroom so you could call for help?
So yes and no. That's a great question. For some reason, some classes don't have telephones. Two of the classrooms I work in right now are missing their telephones. I don't actually know if Corrine had one in her classroom. I surely could ask.
Well, and the second thing was, why did she leave? Weren't there any places next door to her, like other classrooms or other teachers she could have gone to? But other
Right,
than
and
walking in the hall and being so unprotected, and no security in the hall either?
right. That is also a really good question that has come up. And again, as I'm the vehicle telling the story, my assumption as someone, who's seen this type of thing is just bad decision making and decision making on the fly, right? Like when you're overwhelmed with what's happening. I don't think a lot of us are trained enough on what to do. I know I'm not. So I try to stay as update as possible, but I do think that there was some bad decision making all around just because of the nature of what was going on.
Okay. And does the schools have, I mean, I used to do this as well as part of another program, but also the schools, my understanding was, we're teaching teachers and kids about restorative practices, but it's very haphazard and it's very all over the place. So a lot of it could be prevented.
Oh yeah, I agree with you 100%, that a lot of it could have been prevented. There hasn't been a lot of formal restorative justice training. There has been some. I've taken the classes myself, but it depends on the teacher. It depends on the school offering. In my school, we embraced it, and we had leaders come in, and we had middle school training, but we didn't have the same for high school, right? So it's very, very hit or miss on how it's implemented, because it's very hit or miss on who's actually trained in it.
Well, then how can East High School have all of this and then everybody has nothing?
Well, That's another question for you, and funding. And East High School isn't, Sean Nelms pretty much hates me because I have written about my experiences at East and some other experiences at East. But the thing is, I mean, there was a teacher assaulted over there the other day. So, I mean, as much as we say East is the pillar of what's working, we also don't always get the full story. Right now, the U of R is very good at making us see what we want to see. And not what's behind it. Also, there's a funding issue, right? The amount of funding right now that goes to East is astronomical.
Right.
I actually left East. I loved East. I worked in their bilingual program. I left East because I couldn't work somewhere where I knew I was just furthering the inequity. And that's what's going on. So
Now,
it is
Kelly,
Yeah.
I apologize for jumping. Now, is there any truth to the student that assaulted this teacher being a mentally disabled student?
So here's the thing, we don't really know because she didn't know the student and they weren't theirs, which does happen. I mean, it happened in the case of my own assault because I was testing and I was administering the New York State test. There is some sort of documented disability. We don't know what that is. That could be anything from learning disabled to it's a huge spectrum. And the district hasn't released that information. But they did say it was a manifestation of her disability, the student that assaulted the teacher, which happens quite often. In my own building, there was an assault on a substitute teacher, and it was a very violent one, and it came back a manifestation of a disability. And so that's kind of a blanket. And I believe the child's 504 said he was dyslexic, but maybe I could have that incorrect, or learning disability. So it's not a mental disability, like it's not quantifiable. Do you understand what I mean?
Okay.
Privileged information.
It can be though. It can be if they actually did the job of really evaluating the child. Also, I heard it was a girl, not a boy.
It is a female student. And I will say from a journalistic standpoint that we used the they pronouns on purpose because number one, for the aggressor, right? And to have some sort of separation between that. But number two, it shouldn't matter to the public if it was a male that assaulted her or a female. Sexual assault is still sexual assault. It doesn't matter what really the student's gender may be.
Okay, so if someone else wants to jump in, I want to give someone else some opportunity to jump in, ask Kelly a question or have a statement. James?
Okay, even since we last spoke, I did my own research relative to some findings. So that's one thing in today's day and age that I think I'm going to bring to the board. Once someone tells me something, I'm going to go out and do my research relative to it. Now, I did reach out to the principal a few days ago, and I did reach out to the teacher. Neither one of them, I left my personal cell phone for one of them to get a hold of me, not representing the school board, but wanting to get involved and let her know that as a victim that, yes, someone does hear you, because I had heard that she said they're not hearing me. So I heard you loud and clear. I wanted her to know. So I did reach out to them, again, not as a board member, but an elected, official coming on in January. But since then, I did find out that, and again, we don't know, and no one has even told me today what that IEP or 504, or what that disability is. So I'm running blind on that too. So I can only reply to the facts, and the facts are what the New York State education law, the school law, what that indicates. And I like to read that if that's okay. All right. So section 54, it's 76 through 78. It talks about students with disabilities. Disciplining students with disabilities. 5476 indicates, may a student with a disability be suspended or removed from school? It states here, the law, education law, school districts may suspend or remove a disabled student from school in accordance with the procedures and safeguards set forth in both federal and state law and regulations. It goes on to say, unless ordered by an impartial hearing officer in a dangerous situation, it talks about a preschool student with a disability may be suspended or expelled or otherwise removed or approved preschool special, blah, blah, blah. So that's about preschool. But in 5477, it talks about who may suspend or remove from school a student with a disability again. And it says here, and I quote, "It depends on the length of the suspension or removal. A school board, the superintendent of schools, or a building principal may order the placement of a student with a disability into an appropriate interim alternative educational setting." And that's called the IAES. So another setting or suspension for a period not to exceed 5 consecutive school days in the amount of time that a non-disabled student would be subject to suspension for the same behavior. So that's indicating that they can, suspend that child not to exceed, I think I said 5 days, right? 5 consecutive days. So, people have to be careful when they provide information, especially to me coming on as a board, because I'm going to do my research and I'm only going to reply to the facts. And in this case, yes, that child could have been, again, I don't know the disability, what that is, but they could have been removed from that school. I find it very difficult as a board member coming on or board member elect that within 24 hours, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, that student was back in the building. And so, yes, we also have to protect our children, our students, but at the same time, we have to support our teachers. And they shouldn't be in fear of being assaulted, in the classroom or in the building. So that's where I am on that.
Okay, Howard?
Yes, good evening. Mr. James.
Yes, sir.
You're correct, about the importance of information being accurate, but a part of what you just said may not be accurate. It depends on the details of the severity of the disability, the type of disability, and so forth. Those are the critical factors that determine whether or not children can be suspended and certainly expelled. And then there are also regulations. I don't know if they're laws, but there are regulations regarding least restrictive environment. So we know that that's something the district is always attempting to achieve. So we have to be careful. But the critical term in all that you said and everything you read is may. May was the critical term.
Mm-hmm.
So we still don't know, unless you have more details than I've heard here, we still don't know if that student could have been suspended or not. There is a possibility, depending on the details. I'm just saying, I agree with you. We need to be absolutely clear and accurate when we give information, because we can get people all confused more than we already are, But I wanted to actually go back to the point about gender. And of course, it should make no difference when somebody's sexually assaulted, but there are some strange, I can't think of a better word than strange, dynamics around this situation that nobody's talking about. Not that it's unheard of, but we had a young woman chasing a young man. That's not the norm, right? We had a young woman chasing a young man into the room and the young man hiding behind the desk, and no discussion at all that I've heard of about why the chase was taking place in the beginning. Why was that even happening? So that kind of context is frequently very, very important. And so I don't know if you have information about that, Miss. I don't want to mess up your last name. Is it LaLonde?
LaLonde.
LaLonde.
Thank you.
But so that context would be very important to understand.
So from what I know, I don't actually have that answer, and the teacher didn't really have that answer either. That would be, I agree, something that we absolutely should know about. The teacher made the decision because the kid ran in the room and then got beat on, and that's why she intervened. So what happened prior to that is still in my realm. I'm not important enough to know that. So it's still part of the discussion. So I'm sorry that I don't have that information for you. Again, I only have the information people give to me.
I'm in line with what Howard is saying. To me, I think that we're putting the cart before the horse. I mean, we're talking about what should happen to the kid, and we're talking at it from the point where the assault happened. But we don't know the context of how we got there. And that is a critical piece in how we frame this story. Because right now we could be on the wrong track of how we're framing the story. And, you know, and that's the thing that's to me that's detrimental in making a decision in how the media does things. It puts out information, but it doesn't go back to where it actually started. And that is a key point. And if you think about it, it's like many of us have gone to church and we see religious leaders take one scripture, a sentence out of a whole story, and they make a point. But they've taken it out of context because that scripture went with a whole story, and they've taken it to make a point about something that had nothing to do with the scripture itself. And I only say that to say that, you know, how if an assault happens, it just doesn't happen. Something preceded it to get to where it is. And not saying that the assault was right or wrong. I'm not saying that. But what led up to that can make a difference on how the decision as what to do, you know, happens. If someone shoots someone and they shoot them because they were shooting at them, that's different than if they just shot the person. So even though they shot the person, the reason why that happened is important. And we don't want to dehumanize the aggressor until we know all the facts. And I think that the media is kind of putting out a narrative that not having all the facts would be detrimental to the aggressor if we don't know everything that is happening in the process.
Is it okay if I respond?
Mhm.
Or okay, I just didn't put my hand up. No, I think you're absolutely correct. And I think that's why I made some suggestions and some decisions on how this story went in the way that my storytelling and what I've chosen to do with the storytelling, because yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a million things that go on during the day that led to this assault. The frame of the aggressor, in the end, that person still has due process. That person still has all of these things, right? And they still have the right, if the IEP states, like Mr. Howard Eagle said, that this could be, and very well, in fact, a manifestation of the disability. It absolutely could be. The problem breaks down well before the assault happens, but then also well after the assault happens, right? So the lack of transparency, the fact that the teacher didn't even know what was going on and she was the victim, you know, the police, what happened there, the over and over again, and losing the report. So this, I think the bigger issue is, like you said, what led up to it, that this is even possible to happen in the school, right? Like, how did we even get to this point? And what systems are in place to make sure that doesn't happen again? And the answer is really there are none. That this is alarmingly frequent in our high schools, and we just don't hear about it because a lot of the teachers, the children who are part of this, don't talk about it. They're overwhelmed, or they're, you know, scared for their jobs. This teacher in particular wasn't going to go public with it because both her and her husband are teachers, and she feared retaliation, and they have 3 children, you know? So it became like, it gets wrapped up in all these dysfunctional layers. And like you said, the assault is the end product of years of not having services for these kids, you know, not having services for the teachers, unstructured environments, right? So I totally agree with you. that we don't want to dehumanize the aggressor, because the aggressor is also part of the system, right? That has created this. And I mean, hopefully there are people smarter than me that know how to fix it.
James?
I was trying to take a few notes here on the conversation by Kelly. And let me go backward, because that's what's on my mind right now is the whistleblower law. So if an individual reports something that's occurred and there's some type of retaliation against that individual, these are some of the protections, as a school board member, that I would want someone to reach out to me and say, hey, I reported this and now I'm being retaliated against, and then we can do something. What's very important, I ran on 3 things basically. All right. Honesty, integrity, and transparency. My thought is, and I'm not second guessing anyone because I don't know the facts of this case, right? But my thought is that when I'm a school board member, I'm going to be transparent relative to issues. We may not have I take that back. I will know the whole story. There won't be reports lost, as I just heard. Things like that. Someone has to be held accountable for that and be reprimanded for that if a report is lost. That's unacceptable to me. So these are some of the things that I hope to bring, to, the public or to the district, to support the teachers and obviously, to support, the children, the kids. But the classrooms must be safe places and conducive to learning. And we must make them safe for the teachers. So again, I don't know the facts. I can only give you the law and what the law says here. But I don't think we're being judge and jury. I think what we're doing in this forum is very important. We're saying we don't have all the facts, but we're willing to get the story out there. People that may have knowledge, and just be transparent. We need to have conversations like this. So, we can wait until, yes, all the facts come out, but it's good that we generate conversation like this. We talk about it, we discuss it, we come up with, if someone comes to me with an issue, I want you to have an idea on how we can correct that. Just don't come to me with the issue and say, hey, this is the issue. Because that's the first thing I'm going to ask you. Well, what idea do you have to bring to the table that we could resolve this issue? Even though it's my job, or will be my job in January, to have answers to those questions. But initially, if you bring me an issue, I want you to be kind and, have something for me to put on the table to say, okay, I think you should do it this way, or you can do it this way, or have you thought about trying this or trying that? We have a dialogue, we have a conversation, bring everyone to the table, but here we don't know. Like like Fred said, I can only see your first name. We don't have the facts, but it's okay to have the discussion.
Mikey?
So I just want to thank you. Thank you to Toxin Magazine for having me here tonight on behalf of Save Rochester. I am coming on the call a little late, the conference a little late. I was just having a conversation with a young gentleman who was doing a rap about gun violence. And he will be doing that rap on November 1st at our Election Day Mixer and Gun Violence Forum. So please look out for that. And you all are definitely invited. Shanique will be hosting the Mixer. So yeah, please come out and support. We're celebrating Save Rochester also being a 501c3 organization. James, it's great to see you. Mr. Patterson, congratulations. Fred, great to see you again since our last Gun Violence Forum. Great to see everyone on the call. Howard, I think that I'm a teacher in the schools. I've been a teacher for the last 5 years. And the culture is really, 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 how can I put this, depressing, especially coming out of COVID and having no real ideas of how we're going to move forward. Should we be following certain regulations? And I think that heightened insecurity around like what's next is also adding to the anxiety of the teachers. It's adding to the anxiety of the students. And the students are acutely aware that adults don't have any idea what we're doing. And so they're gonna prey on that a little bit, because it is a huge weakness for all of us. And I'd just like to introduce a question. I know I came in on the call late, but I'd like to know what the union has said to advocate for this woman. What have they said to advocate for the student in the system? What is Adam Urbanski's whole position on this? Because I'm not really certain there has been an official statement or whether there was any type of advocacy, but that would be my question. And again, thank you for having us here.
Thanks for the question, Mike. So I am actually a union representative for my building. As far as I know, there has not been an official statement from the union on this particular incident. And you might have missed when I introduced myself, but I was assaulted by a student who wasn't mine during the course of giving them a New York State test. And the child was overwhelmed with the testing, and it was the whole thing. However, the union is supporting her legally, I know, or NYSET. It might not even be our local union, because there is due process that the union has to follow for its members. But like I said, I am pretty sure there's no official statement. This is another reason why I'm the one who put the story out there. I feel sometimes that everyone in quote unquote power is hamstringed by the idea of what they're supposed to be doing and what they represent, instead of, coming out and saying what they want to say. And I find that within our union, within the school board, sometimes with their superintendent, I feel like people, instead of sitting down and having the dialogue, like James said, they're playing roles. And my role is a teacher, and my role is, that I, like James said, the retaliation and stuff, I do know about the laws, and I have a spouse, so I'm not worried about losing my income. So I've kind of taken off on this role of not storyteller, but truth teller, right? Like, you can hate me for what I say, but I can say it. I'm not an elected anything. I have no stake in who Corrine talks to or if this story goes viral, right? I'm not making any money. But just humanizing this world between, I think people look at these forces, the school board. Adam Urbanski's been there for 40 years. He's an institution. The superintendent's office has been transient for the whole time I've worked here, So I think we rely so heavily on those roles instead of hearing what really goes on the day to day. And so that's kind of the role I find myself in as a person. So I'm sorry I don't have the answers to your questions. I wish I did.
Fred?
Okay. I have two questions. I know that James spoke about transparency. I have never seen transparency in any system, and that's any system, whether it be government, state, school board, CEOs of companies. I've never seen transparency. But every single person going for a position will get up and say, that's what I'm going to give you when I get in there. But I never see it. And when it comes to the district, my position is this: I'm paying my taxes for you all to do a job for me while I go and work and provide for my family. That's why I'm paying the district to educate my kids while I go and do this. My question is, in that process, why can't I know what you know? Why does everything has to be a secret when you go in the room, but I'm paying you? That's like going to McDonald's and getting a burger, but they can't tell you what's in the burger. But I can give it to you and say, this is for your best well-being, but I can't tell you what's in it.
I think they do know that.
I get from the district when we talk about transparency. Now, James, make no mistake, I'm not saying that you will do that, but if you do, you will be the first person ever that I've known to ever do that. Now, my second thing is that when it comes to the incident at this, I don't think teachers, especially those working in an urban environment, many of them don't know how to intervene in a given situation. Because if you don't know what's going on specifically, intervening will be just as dangerous as letting the incident play itself out. And that is one of the things that is a problem with our police department, is when they get on the scene, instead of trying to figure out what happened so I'll know how to intervene, they just rush in and you make a bad situation worse. So I think that teachers need to know that. One thing I know, Barbara spoke about restorative justice. In my opinion, I've seen it, and it only works if everybody buys in. 9 times out of 10, students walk in the room with the pretense, I'm going to give you whatever it is I need to say so I can get out of here and go back. I'm going to kick their butt later. But I'm going to tell you what I need to tell you right now for you to let me out of this room. So when it comes to restorative justice, I think that adults look at it a certain way from how they would work with it, but not how the students will work with it. And so that to me, it's not saying that it can't work. I just say it's too much easy to break down along the way. And so, but given this situation, I'm not sure intervening at a certain point, people want to rush to break up a fight. And that can be a dangerous thing. I know that, not to ramble, but I'll make this one last point. The lady that got assaulted on the train in Philadelphia, and they were saying, well, people are watching. Well, I'm thinking about the situation. I'm like, well, gee, I don't know if he got a gun. I don't know, is he on PCP? And then my little strength would probably be null and void to what he's doing. So there's so many different scenarios that in your mind, you're like, okay, should I intervene? Should I not? And am I going to put my life in jeopardy at that point? And to be honest, I think not. I mean, I would call someone, but I don't think that I would rush in. I'm just being honest and transparent at this point on that one. But I would hope that I could do something, but I don't know if all the things that would go through my mind. So I just wanted to put that there.
No, honestly, I've been waiting for somebody to ask about that, because the official line is that you should never intervene, never, which I don't think not just teachers, but I don't think the public realizes that we do intervene a lot more than we should, just because sometimes it's pretty bad and it's getting out of hand. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it gets to a point where it's not okay to watch it any longer. But the official line is that we should never intervene. We should never be in a doorway and block a doorway. If that student wants to flee and get out, we should never be in the doorway to get ourselves in a compromising position, right? So officially, teachers are not supposed to intervene. Officially, nobody is supposed to intervene, truly. So there are the official regulations, and I agree with you. And what I think is happening, like Mr. Johnson said, we have this environment where nobody really knows what's going on. We've come back from 18 months of mess. The teachers are struggling, the kids are struggling, and they see that, right? Everybody sees that. And it's made this heightened environment. So I wasn't in this situation. I wasn't the one watching it unfold in front of me. So I can't speak to why she intervened. She has said on the radio or on one of the news interviews I saw that she's a mother and like she would want somebody to pull this kid off of her kid, which is a very real, from a mother myself, like a very real feeling that is like a visceral feeling when you see crap like this and you don't know what to do. So I think absolutely that if we had training other than don't intervene, you know what I mean? Like that, if we had anything more than the line, don't do anything and go get some help, I think that would be beneficial. It surely would be beneficial in de-escalation strategies. But again, I think there's the environment itself is lending to poor decision-making on behalf of everyone. So I did want to respond to that. I absolutely agree with you that sometimes intervening is not the answer.
Howard?
I didn't know that was the official position of the district, to never intervene. And I know things have changed some since I left the classroom in 2010, I think it was. Yeah, can't even remember how long ago it was. But in the 23 years that I was there never, ever was a fight in my classroom, because the intervention came before the fight. It came before the fight. And that's about, and I'm not trying to second guess anybody and so forth, but there's an art and a science to controlling your classroom. You know that. You know, Mikey knows it. You know it, Ms. Lamont. We educators are taught classroom management. And I would submit to you that many of us haven't mastered it very well. I hate to sound like I'm boasting and so forth, but I thought I was extraordinary at that. You know, and so 23 years, no fights ever. Listen, I had some really big young people in my classrooms who they threatened, but I would always say, well, you got to whoop me, then when you whoop me, you can fight. And they thought I was crazy, you know, they thought I was crazy. But anyways, that's not why I raised my hand. Mr. Patterson, I agree with Fred. I hope that we see some things from you that we've never seen before. I agree with what Fred said. There are things we've never seen. We've heard about this transparency stuff for decades and have never seen it. And I know you're really excited about starting and so forth, but again, we got to be careful with the information, because you mentioned that a report was lost. That was the police who lost that report, not the school district. So we just got to be real clear about what information we're putting out here. That's important. That's very important. So what I really wanted to ask, if Miss LaLonde could speak to this, can you give us some details, like, and maybe Mikey knows too, who is it that people are fearing will retaliate against them if they report violence and so forth? Who is it? And this is a community issue. We need to know these things. You mentioned that somebody was just assaulted at East High the other day. We should know that. We ought to know that. The community can help if we know that. We need to take away this fear of reporting these incidents. We need to know about everyone. And we need to let educators know that we got your back. If you report it and it's accurate, we got your back, right? Make sure it's accurate. And we got your back. The community, we need to let people know that. That's important. But if you could talk about that. And one more thing, if you could talk about, I've read every report, I believe, Channel 8, 9, 10, 13, XXI, and yours. And I saw something in your report that I didn't see in the others. I saw in all the reports that there were hundreds of students, which is baffling to me too, because I'm wondering, like, where was everybody, right? Hundreds of students, right? In between classes. And so how does this happen? And nobody else shows up except one or two teachers. Where the heck is everybody? So that's a question that I have. But also in your report, I saw where it was reported that at one point an all-out brawl transpired in which there were young people who were on the side of the aggressor and other young people who were her students, who was the teacher's students, and they sounded almost like gang stuff. So if you could talk about that too, that dynamic.
Does somebody else want to respond, or were you asking me, Mr. Eagle, or I don't know?
Yes, Kelly.
As far as I know, only you or Mikey could really address this, as far as I know.
Okay. Quickly, I'll address as much as I know and what was in my report. There is gang activity at Franklin. Nobody likes to say that out loud. I worked at Charlotte for my first years as a high school teacher, and I can say with all certainty that there was gang activity there because they were my students and some of my favorites. So there is gang activity at Franklin, and an all-out brawl did end up happening. There are videos of it on TikTok and Instagram that the footage has been taken by the police now. The investigators have intervened now that the story has broke. So they are looking at the footage. They have Freedom of Information acted the footage in the hallway for the cameras, which I have yet to see yet. That might be part of an ongoing investigation, it might be why we haven't seen it yet. And what I believe happened was Corrine says she's getting her stuff ready for her next class. It was passing time. So it was the end of lunch, and lunch is let out. And Franklin houses, a few hundred, over 1,000 students, right? So passing time happens, and this altercation happened at the end of the period. And so then the halls are full. And that's when it becomes, the larger issue. And what looks like, at least from Corinne's perspective, some of her students intervening and a brawl breaks out between people. In her statement to the principal and the district, she did ask to identify the people in the video who were fighting, but I don't have any further information. Like I said, it could be part of an ongoing information on that.
Say a little bit about the retaliation part, about who are they fear, who are people fearing when in terms of retaliation?
Oh, yes.
In terms of retaliation, they're actually fearing district retaliation. So teachers who have, I can tell you, all my tweets and all my Facebook posts are monitored by the district. They contact me weekly if I have something to say. And sometimes it's just like, I don't even know how to work Twitter. I'm 40, so I'm like on the older end of this social media stuff. So I'm not actually good at it. But they monitor my Twitter so heavily that I had a COVID question and I called for 2 weeks. I gave them every opportunity. I called everybody down at the district. Nobody would return my phone calls or emails. So finally I tweeted it. Within 3 hours, I had 3 heads of departments calling me back and screenshotting my tweets. So they monitor people who speak out for good or bad. Like I said, my own personal experience is that they put me on administrative leave and didn't tell me why. And then until I told my story publicly, and then I just got to go back to work with no apology.
I know that Corrine recently, maybe a few weeks ago, published on Twitter that the superintendent she wasn't telling the truth about the COVID cases.
Yeah.
Now, can you say something about that? So are there being lies delivered from the district?
In my opinion, I should say, to cover myself or whatever. Yes, absolutely. People spin a story, right? The district, like I said, is not transparent. Howard just said it, like nobody is transparent because they have a narrative. Right. And they don't want to look bad. Corrine is a very outspoken union rep. She is very outspoken in different areas. COVID safety has been one of them. So retaliation wise, it's not official retaliation, right? Because there's loopholes in the law that you have to prove it, and you have to prove it was because of what you said. But it is very real. I mean, they could call her tomorrow. I believe her chief called and told the principal that she should not come to school after she released her story. And she said, I'm not hiding. I'm not hiding what I did. So there are definitely things that they can do legally, such as put you under investigation and send you quote unquote to the rubber room. They can do that. And they did it with me. So they do monitor certain people. more than others. And it's technically, or most often, I shouldn't say technically, the outspoken people. And eventually we just get tired. A lot of people leave. We've had, I don't know how many people have contacted me saying after they were treated so poorly, after their assault, they left. They couldn't do it anymore. They were victimized over and over again, and they quit teaching. And they, you know, not all of these people can be lying. You know, even if you want to say like 10% of them made a bad decision, or 20%, even 50%, it's still an enormous amount of people saying I was treated so poorly that I quit the only profession I ever wanted. You know?
I'm sorry. We have a few more minutes to talk about this. I know Mikey I think James wants to respond to, you know, there was a lot of things going towards James. James, if you want to jump in there.
Yes, I do. I'll start with Howard. Howard, I'm pretty careful with my words. And when I talked about the lost report, I only found or discovered that report was missing just now by Kelly. I didn't indicate that it was a district report. I didn't indicate who had lost the report. So I just want to be.
Well, you indicated that you would address those kinds of things. And so I'm not trying to get an argument, but I'm just talking about clarity.
Okay. Can I reply? All right. I know Malik very well. As a board member, I can pick up my phone and call him and let him know exactly what has happened, what has transpired. And being the mayor, which oversees the chief of police, I think he is the type of individual, matter of fact, I know he's the type of individual that would get to the bottom of that. So I don't say everything for time's sake here, but I am an individual that dots my I's and cross my T's, and I will be very transparent. And they already know that. I ran on that. So I'm not a career politician, but that's part of what I ran on, and I am a man of my word. Next, interviewing kids and things like that. Yes, it's policy for teachers not to intervening with the kids, but I train, teach, and I'm certified through New York State to train security guards, and SSOs receive the same training that any other security guard receives. By law, if they do not intervene, they can be sued and the district can be sued. Those are facts. So going on, let's see, de-escalation techniques, I think it's great. Everyone can be trained in those. Going back to the student, and you know, Howard, those kids are our kids. And like Kelly said, sometimes if that mother thing kicks in, like I got to protect my kid, whether policy says you should do that or not. It's just in our nature to step in and try to protect someone. God forbid someone gets their head pounded into the concrete and they die and you did nothing. So yes, I know what policy says, but we as teachers, being a teacher myself, all right, being a parent myself, those are our kids too. And we want to protect them as much as possible. So those are the things, let me see, you talked about intervention prior to the event. Intervening, well, in this situation, in this scenario, you couldn't intervene prior to the event. It happened too quick. So we have to realistically think in each situation, okay, could an intervention have worked or wasn't it? It wasn't possible at all. In this situation, it was, from what we know right now, okay, it wasn't possible. When we find out the entire story, maybe it might change. But for now, and the facts that we do know now, which aren't all the facts, these questions or responses are only based off what we know. So that's it.
I just want to say, I think this is excellent discourse that is happening here. I think it is very productive, and someone needs to be kind of organizing something where we can kind of discuss these issues, because I think there is a lot of ambiguity around, we talk about details and being clear about details and facts and things like that. And I think as James has kind of suggested, if he had that fact, he could take it back and get something done about it. And I think that is why this is productive. So the policy, from what I was told, we're not supposed to Kelly was saying, like stand in front of the door, obstruct a student, and we're not supposed to break up the fight. We're supposed to get the SSO. That's just, from what I was taught, I never had to be in a situation where I had to break up a fight. It was too tough. I just had to, kind of separate kids. But yeah, I always felt like that policy was in place because they didn't want to risk any injury to the teacher, which they would be liable for that. So if anybody could provide further clarity on that for me, that would be amazing. When we talked about retaliation, I think the real issue about retaliation, and Kelly has hit the nail on the head, they monitor us so hard on Facebook. They've done it to me. Okay, I've said some things, and this is a page that I wasn't even using my real name. Okay, I was using my name is Michael Johnson. I was using Mikey Campbell, and they had screenshots. HCI had screenshots showing me, asking me to explain, and I'm like, what? And I did really feel like it was retaliation for some of the things that I was bringing up. Claire Labrosa, who is affiliated with Rochester Organization of Rank and File Educators, not only did she face retaliation from the district with her supervisor, her principal, but the union, Adam Urbanski, attempted to intimidate her, calling her into the office, saying she had to attend this meeting, and she could be facing disciplinary actions. It really gets really bad when you call these people out for the horrors that I consider that are going on in the district. And are they lying about COVID cases or not being fully transparent? Absolutely. I don't know who's doing the lying, but whoever's in charge is going to be ultimately responsible for this fiasco. The bureaucratic nature in which they do this pseudoscience of keeping kids from the school to prison pipeline is garbage, because when they're trying to reduce suspension numbers, all you're doing is keeping kids in class and other students in danger. What they really should be looking at is how many egregious offenses of violence, acts of violence, or threats of violence were suspension worthy, and you did not decide to suspend that student. And how did it contribute to that student's delinquency? Because we really need, ironically, as Howard said, preventative measures where we're having, as I think Barbara said, restorative circles. Now, restorative circles ultimately do not prevent a student who really wants to fight another student. What we're doing is we're building a culture where students can talk about issues and kind of hash it out before, punching somebody in the street, or at least they can verbalize something so that teachers are aware that there's an issue to be more proactive. So I know I've said a lot, but, I'm really passionate about these things. And again, I'm glad this forum allows me to kind of connect with you on those issues, guys. Thank you.
So this topic, we're moving on to Dave Chappelle. So whoever wants to stay on to continue to talk about Dave Chappelle's comedy show. But I do want to maybe do a part 2 to this, because we have so much information here. And I think Kelly coming on next week, you had a lot of questions, just trying to really get this resolved. Like when you have issues, we need to be able to be there for you. Any teacher, they should know that the community is behind teachers who are going through these issues in our school district.